Hello and welcome to day 5 of the Heather HATJ Giraffe and Randall Keith Bean trial. Anyways, day 4 was a mess. Day 5, things just get completely crazy, as you'll see. For some reason, I can't highlight this one, so you'll have to bear with me. This is Bean continuing his factual narrative and cross-examination. Anyways, this is the prosecutor. Good morning, Mr. Bean. Good morning. Okay, I want to go back to something we spoke about on Friday. Okay, you talked about co-defendant Heather HATJ Giraffe and excuse me? I'm sorry, you talked about Miss Heather HATJ Giraffe, your co-defendant. Yes, and she was with you every step of the way during the financial transactions, wasn't she? Answer, what do you mean by every step of the way? So, she was with you on Skype while you were conducting all the financial transactions on USAA's website, correct? Answer, most of them, but not all of them. Svolto, the prosecutor, gets Randy to testify against Heather and essentially confessed that Heather was with him while buying the CDs on Skype. Anyway, and so she was on Skype with you and consulting with you when you paid off your credit card bills? No. She wasn't with you on Skype when you were paying off your bills? No. And was she with you when you were conducting with the financial transactions and purchasing the CDs? Yes. And part of them, not all of them. And in fact, you knew that there were folks that were keeping a list of all the attempts that were being made to take money from the Federal Reserve in this way. And, excuse me, you were aware that there were folks who were making a list of all the attempts that were being done to take money from the Federal Reserve. Answer, what do you mean by making a list? Question, a list of attempts. Attempts were, whether an attempt was failed or successful. You were aware that a list like that existed, weren't you? Not aware of a list, but knew that people were trying to keep up with what was going on? Yes. Now, for those who don't know, what the prosecutor is referring to here is this spreadsheet over on IUV.com, in which every single attempt at accessing TDA accounts by people from IUV was recorded. It's in PDF form here. But essentially what, well, if you don't know why this is incriminating, I don't know what to say. But essentially, this is basically, for those who understand, know about internet security, cybersecurity, this is basically a distributed penetration testing of the banking system. They were basically throwing stuff at the wall to see what would stick. And eventually Randy was, unfortunately, the one that found a combination of keystrokes that led to him actually getting cash. As we discussed in the first video about the transcripts, which, the issue was basically a problem with USAA's batch processing, which Randy apparently discovered by accident. But for Heather, this looks bad because she was basically using all these people as in order to as guinea pigs, basically. But keep this in mind going forward when Heather starts to talk, because it highlights a pretty interesting contradiction in her testimony. Anyways, coming back. Answer, not aware of a list. That's obviously nonsense. But if we knew, if the critics knew about the list, then Randy had to know. Okay, and HATJ Giraffe used your success as an advertisement for the success of this whole scheme, didn't she? Answer, that is beyond my knowledge. You were aware that HATJ used your success, your method, as a crutch, as an advertisement that this whole thing worked? No, you never said that on jail call, not to my knowledge. You don't remember saying that on jail call. After I got discovery, that's a different story, not beforehand. No, ma'am. Anyways, so you looked at your this is actually matter. So you looked at the back of your Social Security card to determine which Federal Reserve Bank to use. Anyways, they go back to intent. On the conference call with Whitney Bank, you never mentioned the Federal Reserve. You called it the originating bank, yes, but you never said Federal Reserve Bank. Randy tries to come up with an excuse about it. It's not called the Federal Reserve Bank. Essentially, she did this already. She's basically using the fact that Randy and Heather never referred to it as the Federal Reserve in the call with Whitney Bank to show that they knew that if they said that it was from the Federal Reserve, it will cause problems. So it shows that they knew they were doing something wrong. So who was with you on the motorhome on July 11th? A couple of friends. Was it Alex and Valerie Wegner? Here we find out who the two dudes who were with Heather are. Did you say that you were going to DC? No. Here Randy gets in trouble. You told the Wagners that you were going to talk to someone in USAA Bank. Yes, answer, that was the only purpose to go to Texas. And you told that to Alex and Valerie Wagner. Answer, I did. And so if they said otherwise that... And so if they said otherwise, as they said that you never mentioned going to USAA, would they be lying? Answer, yes, they would be lying. Not only did they not get, did Randy and Heather not get their story straight, but Alex and Valerie essentially testified against Randy, saying that he never told them that he was going to Texas. And further up, Alex and Valerie also said that Randy told them not to open the door to the FBI. Alright, so you're upset at the Wagners right now? Only at Alex. Is that because he opened the door to the RV when the FBI showed up? Yes. And so we were mad at him because he told him not to open the door. Answer, I didn't tell him any. You think that he shouldn't have opened the door now without a warrant? Continues on. Here we got into trouble. Mr. Brown was introduced as an FBI agent to begin with, and then Lauren Palmiciano with Whitney Bank says that she received a call from True Brown. She gave you the information that was from USA. She told me the information that was True Brown, but blah, blah. And basically Whitney Bank gave him the contact number for this is either an FBI guy or a cybersecurity guy. And Jerry Byrne also gave Randy True Brown's contact information. Question, but you never called True Brown, did you? No. Because you knew what he would say, didn't you? No. You didn't call because you knew it wasn't your money, isn't that correct? I didn't call Mr. Brown because I didn't know in actuality who he really was. And you knew all along it wasn't really your money. No, ma'am, I did not. So basically, the prosecutor is trying to show that Randy avoided calling True Brown because he knew that, because he knew he was in trouble at that point. So again, that shows that he knew something. It shows he knew what we was doing wasn't kosher. And it also goes to show that Randy knew very early on that the money that there was a problem with the money, but he still tried to run off with the money very quickly. And you knew all along that the money didn't belong to you, and then the prosecutor stops asking. So now Heather gets her chance to interview Randy, and she begins again, as always, without prejudice. Randy begins asking Bean about his military service. She also asks him about his top secret clearance. Here Heather actually kind of shows some lucidity. Basically, she gets Randy to discuss his knowledge of computers. That basically all he did was repair computers, and that he had no training in computer programming. Blah blah, and basically continuing her ignorance argument. Basically trying to argue that Randy wasn't smart enough to figure out how to steal the money, so he can't be guilty. Anyways, what was your knowledge of banking? Very minimal. Blah blah. She also complains that there was no tutorial giving him information or process to follow using ACH. Here, This is very weird. Anyways, Heather asked him when he learned about birth certificates being printed on bank bond paper. Now, this particular myth comes from, well, the popularizer. I'm not sure if he invented it. Was what's his name? Jordan Maxwell. Essentially, birth certificates are printed on quote-unquote security paper. One of the printers that produces paper for birth certificates also produces paper for bank bonds. So from that, he argues that birth certificates are also financial instruments because they use the same paper. But of course, that's not true. That's just an anti-counterfeiting measure. A lot of people fake birth certificates to. Happens a lot with migrants and that kind of thing. So that's the purpose of the security paper. It's not. Anyway, that's a distraction. Anyways, Randy says he first learned about birth certificates being printed on bank bond paper in the military. That's a lie. Did you learn about SSK Trust? That was afterwards. We say it was in the late 2000s. Okay, into the military. Now Heather. I don't know why she does this. What was your basic understanding of the SSK Trust? SSK, that there was during the Black Plague, there was a trust set up because there was a lot of people that had died and a lot of property was available that people didn't know what to do with. So they set up this trust, and my understanding, this trust is where it had to do a lot with the birth certificates because in just so you get an idea of how confused Randy is, Black Plague is in the 1700s, so that would be 200 years before 1913. Anyway, when the Federal Reserve and the birth certificates came along, as well as the IRS and Social Security system was all tied together, so it's my understanding it was all under the SSK Trust. Basically, that's his understanding of the conspiracy theory. Anyway, do you just know that it's all tied together, or do you know how it's tied together? I do not know. I just know that it's tied together. And how did you glean that information from your research with other people, or actual written material? From a lot of research from other people, books. There was a lot of books that I've read. Obviously, that's nonsense. You got it from YouTube videos. Just a lot of, a lot of research from a lot of friends. Yeah, that great friends you got there, Randy. And you specifically said they set up this trust. Who is they? Well, being in the I guess we learned that there was like a shadow government, and so it was my understanding that the shadow government would be the ones who set up this trust. It was your understanding that you were the value behind the money. Did you glean this from research? I actually heard from when you first started telling us all the documents for the One People's Public Trust. I started learning from the blog talk radio shows. That's where he gets this nonsense from. Explain to us about these documents, and so that's where I learned all that information. Around 2011, 2012. And they continue, my understanding that the court system was under Admiralty law, and that was a big secret for the United States to hide the judicial system under Admiralty law and not to share that with the Americans. Finally, Svalto gets sick of it and objects. I don't think that's a good faith basis for what he's testifying, and obviously it's irrelevant. Heather responds that his personal knowledge, if he had a personal knowledge to even know if there might be an issue, is what we're determining. So basically, he's essentially the question is her response is basically to show that Randy didn't know enough to consciously steal money. And you had stated that you had heard about Heather and Tisha's draft around 2012 December. Answer, yes. This part is weird because Heather is talking about herself in the third person. Randy, and I remember specifically in December that you came on and told us Merry Christmas, that you had all the paperwork done, that all the accounts now belonged to the people. Spring 2017 was there just one phone call? I don't think we had a phone call. We did a Skype. or where we are. No, actually, we might have, but we eventually got our camera on Skype. Was it just one phone call? I don't remember. Anyways. And when was the next time? You stated that next time we had spoken was in the summer of, and then I couldn't catch it about his situation in South Carolina. Correct. I had been illegally detained in North Carolina. It wasn't illegal. He was driving without tags and a whole bunch of other stuff. Anyway, if you're wondering how we know that Randy, what Randy did. It's because he put up a GoFundMe detailing the entire South Carolina situation. As you can see, he had where was it? Okay, you can see that he was using fake tags and a fake ID. And by the way, he only raised $462. But anyways, he says that the arrest was in Richland, South Carolina, which, wait for it, which as Wikipedia confirms, Richland, South Carolina is in Jasper County, South Carolina. So the arrest warrant Randy got arrested for was the traffic stop and arrest that he got busted for. And started raising money over in what was it? This was in 2014, and obviously he didn't show up to court, which is why the bench warrant was issued. Anyways, and I wrote it down as South Carolina, but it was North Carolina. Well, there was 2 or 3 states that I wanted to because I had been arrested and assaulted on several occasions. So, you know, Randy has a pretty long record here. By, like I said, the guise of agents from the government. No, it's not a guise. They really are agents of the government, Randy. And I wanted to find out some type of recourse to correct these wrongs. Well, just get a driver's license and tags. Anyways. During that call, we didn't go into the particulars. You basically stated at that point that that was negative energy. They could not go back and do that again to me again. That at this point we could move forward in a creative new energy. And I said that feels better. So basically ignore the case in South Carolina. Did we go over any kind of plan? No, so it was a quick call. Correct. He said July 4th, that's 2017. Here we go. So here we go. Randy says that he sent Heather a video and he called back, blah, blah. You sent me the video right after you had seen it. That's referring to the, what's it called? The Harvey Dent video. I went to my bedroom, got on my laptop, and this video popped up on my Facebook timeline, and I watched it and immediately realized that this was the accounts that you had filed for all the documentation for the One People for. So this is how stupid Randy is. He sees a video on YouTube and immediately believes it. So you were unsure about whether the video was linked to any work that I had personally that Heather and Tushy Giraffe had done. Well, that's why I called you to find out, and you confirmed that. So yes, I did. When you say that, I confirmed that they weren't linked together. Did I say about the process itself for just the Federal Reserve? Just the Federal Reserve. July 5th, you had informed me that you had gone in. I have questions for you. Yes. Did you explain the process? Yes, because I hadn't seen the video yet. Well, actually, that's kind of interesting because Heather admits that she hadn't watched the video, but still said that, still promoted it anyway. He paid out his car insurance first. Okay, and during this, would you say that if I had records that I was kind of watching and following along with what you were doing, let's say our dates are maybe just a day off, is it a possibility maybe you've got some of the dates wrong? I feel sure about the 4th. I have written down over the weekend every day after that I'd like to share later, but I don't feel like I have missed. Okay, and if it turns out that the data just at the dates themselves due to the fast pace, would that be an intentional mistake of yours? No. So Heather's trying to, again, Heather kind of stops being crazy for a moment and tries to Again, stick to the ignorance argument, basically that Randy didn't lie intentionally. Okay, so you stated that blah blah. Tried it with credit cards and loans. For some reason, Heather walks through the entire process of opening a CD. Not going to read all of it. Did you enter everything the exact same way? This might be referring to the second account with his social security number off by one number. Always put the same account number, blah blah. Anyways, the routing number that I started with that day changed sometime during the course of the day. They changed the routing number for the same bank. And question, how do you know they changed the routing number? Because when I went to purchase the CDs, the routing number said that it was not valid. Okay, so the routing number for that, when you went to, did you figure that out, blah blah. By the way, they can't change routing numbers, so that's nonsense there. They must have blocked it because a bunch of people were using it, which means that Randy used the wrong routing number. Not that there's a right routing number. It said that the account was not valid. The account was not valid. The routing number was not valid. Okay, so you went and did the trust 2. I went and located the new account, new routing number, and then input that routing number. Because I was on Skype and we were all discussing that the routing numbers were being changed really quick. In fact, I believe I was creating a spreadsheet at that. This is Heather speaking. She admits that she was creating a spreadsheet to figure out what was happening with the routing numbers. Right, and you told me at one point you had made a contact call to tell them to stop changing the routing numbers. Now that's a lie by Heather, because she's got no contacts, she doesn't know anyone that has the power to stop changing routing numbers with. And you can't change routing numbers, anyways. Okay, so you located a new routing number. Was that from the Federal Reserve? No, I actually Googled the bank. Whenever so you Googled the bank name. It was like Clearinghouse of New York. Incredible. Then they get to a call. I asked you to walk me through what you were doing as you were filling out the information. And during that time, it got sessioned out, and we ended the call. And then they keep talking. I had my tablet set up with Skype, waiting for phone calls and doing the transactions. Actually, so I mean, they're just incriminating themselves like crazy. Here, Heather absolutely screws up. I'm just quoting from the notes I have regarding the audio. So it was immediately cached within hours of you purchasing it. It referring to the CD. Oh, within a couple of minutes. Oh no, within hours of me purchasing. Yes, within hours of you creating the CD. Yes, I agree. I thought you meant when she. So Heather apparently doing her working for the prosecution. Gets Randy to confess to cashing in the CD within hours of buying it. You don't actually know what their security protocols are. No. Did you ever talk to USA about their security protocols? No. Have you ever seen any material about the ACH system? No. Regarding the factualized trust, this is a document. So this is the best then. In fact, I created that document. Yes, you did, and I emailed it to you. Yes, for your signature. Yes. Talking about the thumbprint. Now, a big question: did you understand those documents? For that biggest part, yes, I did. When you say no, like, can you please? Oh my God. Do you know anyone who understands those UCC documents? Am I the only one that understands those documents? I know that on the Blog Talk radio shows, there are people who understood the documents. You never received information from me explaining how to use those at UCCs at all? No. In fact, did you receive any information from me how to use that factualized trust? No. Who are Alex and Val Wegner? They're friends of mine who are involved with the Blog Talk radio shows as well and became part of the a tour that went across the United States known as the Opal Tour, and Alex was actually the mechanic for a lot of the RVs, so I didn't know that Alex was involved with the Opal Tour. Oh my god. When was the Opal Tour? Now they're talking about the video. During that particular call, you and I both had used the word attorney to describe myself, didn't? Yes, and I didn't correct you, did I? No, you did not. When you first, you had corrected me saying that you're not an attorney, you're my lawyer, and I just kept saying attorney off the top of my head. In fact, I had clarified that I was the lawyer for the Factualized Trust and not Mr. Bean, except for you as a trustee. So in your capacity as a trustee that I was assisting and representing, apparently, Heather here is trying to argue that there's a difference between attorney and lawyer, and that she can be a lawyer for a trustee. Of course, that's not true. You can't be a lawyer for a trustee if you're not licensed, so that's not an excuse. Then they talk about medical attention, blah, blah. There was an awkward part where Randy starts to brag about how cool the RV is. Heather talks to him once again and starts by saying, without prejudice, do you believe the funds that you used to buy were yours? Yes. Did you believe that funds you used were yours to buy the CDs? Yes. Did you believe the funds that were used to pay off your car was yours? Yes. Did you intend to commit any crimes? No. Did you believe that you were commit a crime? No. Did you and I conspire to commit a crime? No. So just to clarify here, at no point does Heather try to argue that these accounts are real, that the TDA accounts are real. Her only defense, and Randy's only defense in the entire trial, is that they thought that the accounts were real, that they thought the funds were theirs. Implicitly, they're accepting that if you don't have, that should be pretty good evidence that Heather hadn't believe the accounts were real. Then Svalto gets to ask her. They talk about the Opal Tour that they met. So you didn't pay off any debts on 3rd. That's not true. So the Facebook post that says I paid off all my debts, I did do that post, but not on the 3rd. Yeah, it's a problem there because apparently Facebook says that you did on the 3rd. Then they talk about the routing number. You got the routing number from Google. I Googled the address of the bank, which came up when I first put in the routing number. I wrote down the bank name. I Googled whenever I found the second routing number. Oh my god. But you do know for that it was for the Federal Reserve. It was for this clearinghouse bank. A clearinghouse for the Federal Reserve. Yes, I understood it to be the Federal Reserve. You did that, but you did. That's what I understood. Well, let me ask you. I'll just ask you from the witness stand just to verify a conversation we had while the jury was out. Anyways, do you have any other way? Okay, so they take lunch, and now it's Heather's turn to do her opening statement, and get ready because this is amazing. Thank you. Okay, good afternoon. This case is so much bigger than what anyone knows. You're going to hear evidence that's presented to give you an insight to what some have called a war. I personally call it a cleanup, and you're going to hear that testimony based on things that have been going on behind the scenes, and there have been reasons why it's been going on behind the scenes. Until recently, until October of last year, we're going to hear, October of last year, everything's changed, and we're going to hear testimony about not just one man, but of hundreds of thousands of people, not just here in America, but also people all over the world who were put out to be human fodder within this secret war cleanup that's been going on since before I was born. We're also going to be hearing about the actions that were taken in July to be able to mitigate, if not terminate, that particular threat against the people in America as well as around the world, and it was in connection with the threat that was being made against the President of the United States, Donald Trump. The prosecutor already freaks out. This insanity and objects. I know these are her opening statement, but there is no basis in fact to this. I believe it's my opening. I haven't gotten to testify yet and present that evidence. Well, it's your opening, but your opening is related to matters that it's relevant, and if the court would give me some leeway, keep in mind this is an opening statement, and you should be, I guess, on notice that you might state in your opening what you might believe. But if you attempt to enter, blah blah blah. Anyways, so we go ahead. You're going to hear testimony about why I took specific actions and what those actions were based on, and that those actions were done with full responsibility, accountability, and liability in order to protect anyone from being harmed. There is a very much pixelated picture that is very unclear, and only until October of 2017 did it start to become visible. The evidence that will be presented today will give you those pieces. Thank you. You may call your first witness. She calls herself to the stand. They swear her in. Since you are representing yourself, you may provide a factual narrative. Anyways. Okay, my name is Heather Antucci Giraffe. Should I spell that? No. I grew up in Tacoma, Washington. Okay, so Heather is going to give us her full life story. And as we're going to find out, almost all of it is nonsense. My family is very prominent in the area. This is partially true. They helped build a lot of the county, if not the state, and well, partially true. And I've worked for them since the age of 10. That was my first life, was in construction. It was also my first experience in business practices, which today are called white-collar crime. So she accuses her family of committing white-collar crime. And by the way, that's something that comes up in the UCC documents. A lot of it is accusing her family of white-collar crime. By the way, that nobody in the Tucci family has ever been accused of white-collar crime. So this is a false accusation by Heather. A slanderous accusation against her own family is stated under oath. My family has a multi-state, multi-million-dollar construction company. That's apparently true. Plus, we do developments throughout Washington State. I've worked on large highway projects, freeways, overpasses, bridges, and I did that from the age of 10 until I graduated from law school. Now, let's be honest here. At age 10, you're not working on large highway projects. He was probably standing around pretending to help, but no, look, maybe her dad took her to work once or twice, but no, she was not working on large highway projects, but either she's trying to exaggerate or she really believes this stuff. And while there, I also did accountant. I went to University of Puget Sound and received my bachelor's, and during that time I interned for our company in the accounting firm and learned about accounting procedures, different programming, forensics, auditing. A lot of times we had to prepare things for bids because we worked with the state of Washington, so I would have to do all the accounting procedures and the accounting forensics for not just the bid, but also if there was a litigation for a process. This is obviously the nonsense. There's no way that she did all of the accounting procedures by herself. If you don't believe me, go speak to a CPA. This is not possible. And by the way, she's not a CPA either. So look. Okay, in that development company, that part of the arm was run by my uncle, whose grandfather was the vice president of Starkist Tuna. Now, unfortunately, I don't have Heather's full family tree, but so I can't verify whether or not this is true. And like it says, her uncle's grandfather, that would be a pretty long time ago. So this might be true or might not be true. I'm not sure. But anyway, it shows her tendency to name drop. Whether her uncle's grandfather was the vice president of Starkist Tuna really doesn't mean anything. Had a very strict policy about paper trail, and that's when I learned the benefit of having a paper trail. So I would do all the paperwork, all filing, and if there was anything missing, this was about the age of 12 to 15 that I worked in that particular area with the finance company. She would do all the paperwork at age 12. That's not true, period. My family would also start and own banks. They currently, to this day, own a bank. However, I've never worked inside of our banks at all since I was young. This is a lie. The Tucci family do not own any banks in anywhere, period. However, they were big parts of our development and our construction projects, blah, blah, blah. Also, during that time, from 12 to 21, I learned about Securities and Exchange Commission. First, a lot with private companies we had to do with work with, and we had to do compliance and things like that. We had an in-house counsel named Chris Huss. I also worked with him, and he was the one that prompted me to go to law school. And the reason that I even went to him was because I was in my graduating year from college. I was studying for the CPA exam, studying for my finals, graduate, and that. Oh wait, she is a CPA. Well, Actually, I'm not. Did they say if she passed the CPA? Well, we'll find out. I was also interning at a pension consulting firm, which my family had helped a friend from Greece start up, which has been running. There's no way to verify that, but this company apparently does exist. That company was called Spectrum Pension Consulting. And by the way, notice that she says she was interning at a pension consulting firm, which my family had helped start up. The timeline really doesn't make any damn sense. She says that she was working as doing accounting at her family's company, but also simultaneously working for Spectrum's pension. It doesn't make sense. It was during that time that I experienced the inner workings of general manager and the corrupt practices that were done in the pension consulting industry, and a lot of it was very shady. So she's accusing Spectrum Pension Consulting of, again, white-collar crimes. I wouldn't say it was, at the time I didn't know whether it was legal or illegal, but I didn't know, I didn't feel good about it, and the pension that she talks about swaps, and that's why I had gone to Chris Huss in the first place. This goes to expand on my uncle, paper trail, blah, blah, blah. I put all notes for my general manager. I'm told to do this, and I explained to us, alright, this is what I do. He just says, if you know something to be illegal, it doesn't matter what someone told you to do, you're responsible. I found out that general managers don't like to be confronted with evidence that their company might be doing something not completely legal. So it looks like she was causing trouble back then. Anyway, she went to Gonzaga University School of Law, and that was in 1996. I almost didn't get in, but I did get in. It was one where I had professors from all over. One of my professors was the Vatican's United Nations representative. This right here is a lie. None of the Vatican's United Nations representatives have ever taught at Gonzaga University. You can verify that for yourself. This is yet another lie by Heather. The other one was a constitutional advisor to the White House. That appears to be true, but it's not. I don't know if he was teaching there while Heather was there, but let's give her the benefit of the doubt. During the time that I was in school, there was another one I was doing, basically setting up programs in countries like Libya, blah, blah. She was trained on litigation, blah, blah. I was on the national trial team. Gonzaga, I worked as a city prosecutor. It was not actually that interesting. And so within that office, I found the same kind of problems, questionable activities, questionable practices. Of course, I still quite did not stand. She went to intern for Superior Judge Gregory Seipolt. This guy actually does exist. As an intern for a year and a half. It would be interesting to get his info, to his version of events. I mention all this because it is what helped me develop habits that has saved my life and were part of what happened in July. Now this is when it just completely goes off the rails. So after that time, I graduated from law school. It was my last week, my graduating week of law school, when I was contacted and asked if I wanted to be part of a cleanup. Now I had grown up with individuals such as General Major Timothy Lundberg, who was the head of the U.S. National Guard for all of Washington State. This guy either this guy doesn't exist or she's lying about his position. Anyways, I worked with Homeland Security as well as advised on the Governance Association and advised individuals at the White House. I don't know. I grew up with that family. They're good friends as well as Congressman Norm Dix. I don't know if that's true. It might be possible. Anyway. So another part of it was good family friends of ours were the Weyerhouses or George Russell. No idea whether that's true. Anyways. Lundberg, as far especially during investigations that I would end up doing with Mr. Lundberg, as far as financial instruments, that can be true because a U.S. National Guard would not be investigating monetary instruments. Anyways, my job that I was going to take, or that I would take after 10 months after being asked to do it, after blah blah, involving a cleanup of blah blah. It was presented as a core issue of everything that wasn't working, and that was banking. Now, because banking did not have borders, I actually had to go overseas and stay in France, Italy, Spain, and China. Start off with Italy. My family is Italian. I took 4 years. Of course, I didn't learn anything, so I had to start all over. I lived in Italy from essentially 2000 to 2002, so I spent almost 3 years there. During that time, I met with more U.S. politicians in Taormina. I was stationed in Taormina, where I studied the language at levels for professional application. Sigonella, which is a naval station close by. So during that time, part of what I was asked to do was help with funding for a World Trade Center in Sicily, and Sicily and Italy had a big problem. Now, this in particular is another lie. There is no World Trade Center in Sicily, and I can't find anything about a proposed World Trade Center in Italy either. So again, more confabulation, or whatever you want to call this, things made up by Heather. She talks about Sicily wanting to succeed. We've heard about rumors in the states in the United States wanting to leave. And then she also mentions Catalonia. Anyways, so I was able to. So a lot of meetings that were held when I was in Taormina. This was one thing about doing this. I use the term cleanup. Was I had full autonomy as well and discretion over how I chose to do my part. However, transparency was the #1 protocol. Digital paper trail. So I pretty much had access to. Access to a number of different officials and their offices to be able to learn, almost like an international internship, but for nobody to be able to. So at that point, I got married and had 2 kids in Italy. Then we moved back to the United States so that I could begin prep work, and that prep work including setting foundations that would later be used in the cleanup. I had worked in the city prosecutor's office in Spokane. That was when I was in law school. Went to Pierce County. She applied and got rejected. I did go there. She was a public defender 2002 until 2003, so she could only hold the job for about a year. Keep that in mind. My family's pretty prominent in Pierce County. Anyways. This is one of the few people Heather mentions that are real. She apparently does work for the port of Tacoma. Anyways, big question there was the funding of prosecutors, and so I did get to learn, blah, blah, blah. I was doing an investigation test case inside of Pierce County. I got to see the inner turmoil, blah, blah. I worked at the prosecutor's office from 2003 to 2006, which is when I left. And then I went to the international, back to the banking, so I could go get ready for everything for the final test, to grab all the data for the final implementation of solutions. So while I was working overseas, I went back into the bank, trade, and finance. I worked with authorities from all over the world, intelligence agencies and whatnot. Doesn't mention what intelligence agencies. It's apparent, and I was taking approximately 90 monetary assets and projects a week in doing the compliances on them. Uh, God knows what this means. I don't know if you can do compliance on 90 assets a week. I don't okay. God knows what that means. Who was she doing this for? He doesn't say. As well as going in and doing all of the auditing. So I mean, she was a one-man a one-man audit firm. I mean, I also worked with the bankers from different banks from all around the world to make sure all the funding was set up correctly, that all reporting was going to be complied with for end time. God knows what that. A lot of projects that I worked for also had to get in United Nations. China was usually the one that had the immigration program, so that was another aspect that would become vital. God knows. And in kind of banking, it's known as human capital. This is just. They would also have to go. They will also have to have some kind of pull with political figures in order to get visas for Chinese nationals be able to come here and do the work. It was a requirement that 51% of all labor that was applied would be done by Chinese nationals. God, I don't even know when. Later, there would be found to be a problem that a lot of the Chinese nationals would never come back. They would skip out on their visas. A lot of, God knows what she's talking about. If someone paid $1 million, they would have to do the lottery program. I mean, I don't even know what she's talking about here. The other thing I worked with a lot was Switzerland, and with a gentleman named Chris Alfrey, who runs Leo Trade. I think I looked this guy up. He does not exist, period. And he says which Leo Trade is basically the largest shell company, holds the largest amount of shell companies, and those shell companies were used a lot at the highest levels of bank rate of finance in order to set up schemes from all over the world for these projects. So, I mean, if someone wants to try and figure out what this means, go ahead. My guess is that she's imagining this one. And it really just was a matter of trying to get anyone that had a monetary instrument to come hypothecate that through a bubble called a shell company. She talks about how she thinks shell companies work. She talks about business practices, putting money into the bank deposit and not touch it for 7 or 20 years, and then the bank will say, give us a standby letter of credit, 400 million, essentially a long line of hypothecation. Anyway, I always like to have 100% transparency, but in banking that was never available to every single party involved. There was a lot of hiding of information, especially of how banking worked. That is one of the most guarded secrets on the planet. Maybe next to Antarctica. If you follow OPTT and Heather, you know what she's talking about here. I guess it's basically aliens and Nazis in Antarctica. And imagine being in the jury and being told that Antarctica is the most guarded secret on the planet. You know, a giant continent is apparently a secret. I did move and worked. I had moved back to Washington State, and by that time I had 4 children, and I was working on the last project that I worked on was in Zambia. Now I've been reading and listening to Heather for 6 years. She's never mentioned Zambia. She says that last project she worked with was in Zambia. God even knows. God knows what the hell this is. She name drops all the banks for some reason. Immigrant aspects to these projects, especially with China and Russia, we had it became a matter of people, so housing, a matter of how these people don't know what's going on, so housing became important, and I worked with different world organizations to deal with housing, food, and job. So what they ended up doing, we started notice in approximately 2008 that there was a big financial crisis, which was completely contrived. It was just a bunch of practices that basically got bottlenecked. and we ended up having the Occupy Wall Street in that particular instance, and I got this. And during and from 2008 and onward, I worked with a lot of different intelligence agencies, including my husband, who I'm married to, was born in Morocco and basically grew up in Florence. Again, which intelligence agency? Nobody's on it. So a lot of military intelligence agents, military intelligence, were trying to recruit her husband. Why? She's talking about this guy. We started a company, or he started a company. It's probably the antique store. There was a real problem with artisans and products. We had products from Morocco, for instance. That's probably where my greatest knowledge base is that led to the cleanups. Oh my god. A program called Sister City. This is apparently a real thing. I did go in to start the sister city between Tacoma and Morocco. That might be true, but I got to work with the founder, who is Bixler Mazos. I could not find a Bixler, so let's put a question mark on that one. In fact, everything here has a question mark. My first experience were with the State Department at that level. So I got to see a lot of Bixler Mazos. I had 2 children in Italy, I had 2 children in America. We went to register their birth certificates in Morocco, what they called their family book, and the Moroccan government was very good at explaining it and how they needed it, so they could stamp it and send it to that IMF, so that when we are there, they get to be able to collect funding. So when kids are in the States, of course, the children have dual citizenship. Of course, birth certificates are not sent to the IMF. The prosecutor grills her on that later. It's really a process. I was working on with Switzerland, and so I asked Christophe Ray about that, who is a Swiss authority. I can't find a Christophe Ray. That might be fake. He does all the security for Davos. So that might be, again, this guy is probably fake. During that time, I also, during the first 11 years of my graduation, I spent a lot of time, blah, blah, blah. During that time, I also worked with the different law enforcements from all over the world. She says that, but there's no record of that. Eventually, there was so much fraud, I did an investigation. I was asked to do an investigation. Call high-level programs. Exhibit investigations. This is, well, anyways, how they would do it. I would give a bullet report. Here's why I blah. So that's what's on this particular report, because I was gonna be exiting. I believe she's referring to the paradigm report she made. It's not clear who asked her to make the report. I suspect that she is hallucinating that people are telling her to do reports, because the people she keeps referring to people that don't exist. Anyways, during that time when I got involved, or in Panama, or on a project where the president of Panama and many other presidents around the world, after they leave office, they would get a monetary instrument that they could use for 1 to 2 to 5 years, depending on what they negotiated with the families in Asia, and they would use that for whatever they wanted to. Now, obviously, that's not true. A lot of them would set up some sort of operation where it would kind of fund their lifestyles for the rest of their lives. This particular was a former president of Panama who wanted to go in and create a rail system that went from Colombia all the way up to the U.S. This is not true, as far as I can tell, because in Panama you have a port there. That's what I was working for. I would work on assets that were anywhere from 1 to 100 billion. That's, again, zero evidence of that. And so in this particular case, I was given a batch instrument in $100 billion tranches. They all had essentially Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac securities. We found that there was a lot of fraudulent paper issued and sold on NASDAQ. I was told not to go what we call behind the NASDAQ and look inside the files. But I chose to do that because at the time the U.S. Secretary of Transportation showed up in Panama, and I received a call from my intelligence contacts. She keeps saying she has intelligence contacts. Zero evidence of that. We'll find out anyways. Within a week, FBI was down in Panama. Now, as far as I know, the FBI doesn't have jurisdiction in Panama, so that's nonsense. The president of Panama was under investigation for fraud. I am pretty sure that this did not happen. I gave all that particular to the Panamanian. I'm guessing she meant to say government and then president of Panama. There was a lot of collusion, HBC, essentially stealing clients of tribal. They would go out and say, do you want a loan for your farms? Because in Panama, there is a lot of farmers. The banana. What a great sentence. Because in Panama, there is a lot of farmers. The banana. So we had Pelosi involved. Yes, Nancy Pelosi was involved in Panama giving loans to banana farmers, according to Heather. Now, of course, this is not true. We had the Dole family involved because the banana industry is very big there. I wasn't able to find any Dole industry business in Panama, so that's probably false. Some of it came out in the Panama Papers later. Here's my theory here. Heather heard about the Panama Papers and retroactively invented in her mind that she was involved with Panama. That's what I think happened. I had a house, I have 4 kids, blah blah, so we still had the money from money laundering. And during this time, that's when Tim Geithner had introduced what was called. That's when Congress and Timothy Geithner from the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, who was formerly with the Federal Reserve Bank, had introduced what was called TARP. This is, of course, not true. Tim Geithner did not introduce TARP. TARP was introduced by the Bush administration. Timothy Geithner was Obama's guy. It was supposed to be a mortgage relief program. Well, that's a simple mistake to make. But then she talks about the Bank for International Settlements. I changed my own protocol with this job that I took back in 2000 to do the universal cleanup with a number of teams across the world. So what I did was put up my own home for this particular part of discovering the mechanics. I went through all the way the court systems through the banking system, and so the house that was used, there were 4 people involved in deciding which house would be used. In order to control the whole thing, there's no way to decide not only other instant. Oh my God! Resulted in these sentences do not make sense. So that house was used, and there were 4 people involved in deciding which house would. In order for me to control the whole thing, because I was an attorney, in order to control every single aspect, growing. Okay, now the only other instance that I was around Congress Bernard doing that. Oh my God. So a lot of the people doing this investigation that I did in 2010, I started in 2010, were the people that worked on the savings and loan scandals. Brenda Steele, who was basically formerly with one of the senators in Washington, D.C., as well as DOJ, Department of Justice, and she was older. Brenda Steele does not work for the DOJ and never worked with any senators in Washington. Again, this is not. She gave me a history of how they never had licensed bar attorneys in there. They were just always lawyers, and explained to me the difference between bar attorney and lawyer. Brenda Steele is just a sovereign citizen lady, as far as I can tell. There is no Brenda Steele that ever worked for the Department of Justice. So this is Heather making. This is, I believe this. Well, either Brenda told Heather that she worked for the DOJ, or Heather imagined that Brenda worked for the DOJ. I'm not. You'll have to guess. Let me actually pull up his CV first. Okay, okay, Agent Son, okay, this is actually true. He does work for, what's it called? Truth Technologies. This is true. He does all the background checks for the banks. Unclear. It's not clear whether she worked with him. He was a former chief of counsel for Luxembourg Bank. That's not true. He was the general representative for a bank from Luxembourg. And he did not work in the Luxembourg Royal Military. That's not true. I was actually approaching him to go in because MERS database, so you know my habits. Okay, notice how she changes the story. She worked with him, and then she changes to saying she approached him. I'm guessing that she probably wrote him an email, and he ignored her, and she changed that to say mean that she worked with him. Clean it. Anyways, the coal. So with Edged, there was no protocols. That was a suspicion. This is what this paradigm. I also, in this particular put in regarding the case, because we also ended up having a lot of judicial corruption. So she's talking about the paradigm report, and judicial corruption appears to be a reference to her eviction in 2011. I would say judicial system structure. So, you know, I had to go in and investigate the FBI and how Hoover's relationships and his Swiss connections, his German collections, and how Andrew Mellon, the Secretary of Treasury at the time, worked with Hoover in order to create a law enforcement agency that would enforce the Federal Reserve's banking objectives and manage the human capital from becoming aware. So, little conspiracy theory there by Heather. So I ran essentially 4 primary cases, test cases, to be able to go in, and it was never about show me the notes, it was about show me the loan. So this explains one of the, Heather says that there were 4 cases, foreclosure cases that she was involved in. Unfortunately, there's only, we've only been able to track down one case where Heather essentially was, how do I say? The post is on Qualos. It's complicated. She got them to transfer the house to her, and then got foreclosed on, and then the case was dismissed. We only know about one because it turned federal and showed up on Pacer. But it's very confusing what was going on there. Then she talks about the FDIC. She doesn't know what the FDIC insurance is. It doesn't really insure the depositors. It makes basically a conspiracy theory about the FDIC. It's not true there. She says the comptroller told them to change their practices. They didn't, and she was running a test case. A judge that helped me. Multiple judges. Okay, that particular deceptive acts and practice brief was, in fact, it was a judge that helped me. Multiple judges at the federal level. This is a lie. Nobody helped her. She's never, no judges helped her. Very distressing. So during that time, it then got used. So during that time, the deceptive acts and practices brief then got used by 49 of 50 states by the Attorney General's nonsense. Excuse me, I think I skipped something here. She talks about TARP. She applied to TARP. She got rejected. By the way, anyway, she says she applied to TARP, got denied. She says that China was very upset with it, and that we ended up finding out what China demanded all their money back, and to basically have the United States Treasury cut up or shred all the fraudulent paper. This, of course, did not happen. So our suspicion was that TARP was actually there to get authorization. $7 billion. Anyway. Fact the universal cleanup was that very few families got approved and received funding from the START program. That's technically true. The money disappeared. Not particularly. Well, you ended up having the Federal Reserve testify where they didn't know where the money went. So this, anyways. Another particular aspect of find out how the judicial was at risk. One of the things with the judicial was that we found out that the sheriffs are completely at risk because they have oaths and bonds. Everyone in judicial is supposed to give an oath and a bond. Okay, they're supposed to be on file. When I worked for Judge Seibold, he had his oath and he had his bond sitting up with him at the desk. Davidson finally gets the objection. I think this is getting a little far afield. What is its relevance? The relevance shows how law enforcement was at risk at the time for a habit of how I handled the risk that happened in July with Mr. Bean, as well as the enforcement that were. I'm not sure about the testimony about a prior employer's placement of an oath, but I'm not seeing how that relate else. So anyways, so I continue to work. I have contact with all these intelligence agencies as well as insiders. She does, but she can't never mentions any. And so on the 24th, I was still an attorney. I was told that my bar license would be at risk, and that by using my bar license, I would be arrested that day. I believe this. Well, anyway, so on the 25th. She's apparently, I think she's talking about her arrest during the foreclosure, but why she's saying that, but she's kind of twisting it. Then she thought a lot of people would do liens, so you had a lot of individuals trying to lien judges, and that puts but so does the behavior that put liens, so she's referring to the sovereign citizens, the lien thing. And yes, they did try, but it didn't. This is what's going on now. So there were a lot of precautions. I worked with people in the FBI, the DOJ, CIA, and the federal judges to show the risks as well as in order to work them out. Okay. After March 24th, I was assisted by one of, well, let's just say in the intelligence arena, there are ways that they are able to utilize other people's emails or phones so that it looks like something is coming from someone, but that, for instance, it's really from one of them. And there are certain language and certain codes that you establish through your relationship and your experiences with this intelligence in order to know that the bankers to know that the message is from them. So here how they're saying that she knows how to receive secret messages from emails, which again really makes me think that she is crazy. On 28th of March, in that was shown in that particular court appearance, one of them who manages the Rothschild family. They're in France or London, so she starts to talk about the Rothschilds because in this particular test case, an unexpected event happened where I was arrested after I had been bumped by an officer. That she's talking about her arrest in 2011 after this, during her foreclosure or eviction. This officer, who I later found out had been paid off by the bankers to move things along, I'm just making that up. This particular trustee from the Rothschilds sent her informations on how to certify. All you have to do is just get the Attorney General to certify that that is lawful. When someone does that, 99% of the time, the cases get thrown out or dismissed. So it looks like someone sent Heather fake info on how to get cases dismissed, and she, I'm guessing, assumed that it was from the Rothschilds, or someone is pretending to be the Rothschild. That's what I'm gonna guess is going on here. Then it only wasn't quiet, and what I found out was people were looking for their own personal solutions, mortgage issues, more. So she's talking about so they would essentially apparently, if you translate this into English, she says she's found that a lot of people were trying different scams to get out of financial problems. At a certain point, I was offered a job to be a director of a bank in Spain in order to stop everything that I was doing. She mentions for Bandenia Bank. This is apparently a real thing. So at this point, what was very upsetting was a project that I had been working on. It was the only one I retained from my bank and training finance days. That was Zambia. God knows what the hell she still hasn't said what she was doing in Zambia. Keep in mind, she was doing all these different things, but also in Zambia. It does make sense. Now, I love this one. Check this out. The U.S. Secretary of Treasury, Timothy Geithner, at the time, had basically stolen a whole bunch of gold vines in order to find, essentially, a unification and new programs within the European Union. And in February 2011, that's what happened. Tim Geithner stole gold vines in 2011 to unify the European Union. Okay, look, people, please. None of this happened. Timothy Geithner never stole gold vines in Zambia. What are gold vines? There is no such thing. And I've been trying to check. Nothing happened in the European Union in February 2011. The European Union was already unified in February 2011. So the Zambia project closed. So the Zambia project closed, even though she never said what the hell the Zambia project was. Alright, so the judge calls for an afternoon break, and he points out, Ms. Tujiraf, we certainly heard a lot for about an hour and a half. Heather has been talking for an hour and a half of nonsense. That is a difficult thing to do. Here she tries to put in a document into the record. So essentially, in my experience, I thought that the Constitution and the statutes and the codes were the law of the land. In actuality, through my last 20 years of work, it was actually the Uniform Commercial Registry nonsense. The prosecutor objects, saying that, number one, it's irrelevant, number two, it's not true. Thank you. So every piece of property that's registered in the United States is registered through the Uniform Commercial Registry. Okay, that's not true. Anyways, I'm gonna skip the boring parts here. So there was one filed on May 4th, 2000, which would have been the year that I was actually in Italy. I was no awareness of this particular perpetuity, and this perpetuity basically covers all the systems here in the United States, and this perpetuity is this perpetuity back in 2000, and here we get to Charlie. This perpetuity back in 2000 had been written and actually filed by a gentleman named Charles C. Miller with the assistance of the U.S. Treasury, Federal Reserve, and Chinese. Okay. Number one, Charlie Miller was not helped by the U.S. Treasury and Federal Reserve, and by the way, this perpetuity would have been written about 2 years after Charlie was sent to jail. He was sentenced in 1998, so this was something that he filed from jail. So this is nonsense. Chinese families overseas are the ones that had holdings in the United States, and she claims that the filing in 2000 put all the property in the United States in the hands of one individual. In my review in 2011, she found out that it was impossible for anyone to figure out how the UCC worked at that level without having someone inside who had told them. So basically, she researched Charles Miller paperwork, and Jesus Christ. That file was offered by this individual as a gift to the people because he felt he was in the middle of negotiations for some kind of property in Hawaii. Ugh. He was trying to negotiate a loan. Wait, if he owns all the property in the United States, why is he trying to get a loan? Oh my god. So he basically, this tool was a public trust. This is public trust Heather got from Lee Miller. Then she talks about Christopher Wray regarding. I don't. This is what an absolute mess. Instead, his intent was to gift it to the people. Instead, he actually gifted it. So then she tries to file the UCC filing into the paperwork, into the exhibit for, basically. Davison objects, thank God. Your Honor, none of these documents say what she says they say, and we've had many court hearings and rulings regarding these UCC filings. They were inadmissible and still inadmissible. The judge asked, what is the relevancy of this document and who is Charles Miller? Charles Miller was part of the Universal Cleanup, and he worked with U.S. Marshals as well as the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve. That is not true. Has he been involved in this case at all? This is filing itself. So they discuss whether it's. So she starts to talk about the UCC document. That was incredible. Then we have a very confused explanation from Heather about how banking works. So, for instance, a euro. In order to actually have a euro, they would have to have a Federal Reserve dollar inside their bank in order for a euro, and that's where your currency fluctuations are incredible. That's not true. Here we get an explanation from Heather of how she thinks things work. So the Federal Reserve Bank is actually the one that's holding in custody all of this property, and the collateral is actually also all the collateral is recorded, and it goes through the U.S. Treasury. The U.S. Treasury then submits its securities, and the Federal Reserve goes out and sells it. The U.S. Treasury can sell it directly. There's been a lot of strategic. So, for instance, I'm the one, Timothy Geithner. All these banks, in order to clean them up, had to be put in a position where they weren't able to commandeer the people of the property of America. So that's what these particular filings are. That one secures you as an individual. Okay, notice that she keeps saying okay at the end of every sentence, which is notice okay. And in this particular one was to secure your property that may be held in other banks, no matter where they were on the planet. Oh. She talks about the executive order, factualized trust. Well, this is boring. Oh, here we go. So this particular one here was regarding anything, including vehicle titles. So at that point, Mr. Bean and I did have knowledge about that. I didn't go over all of it with him because I had a whole another matter that I was, and another imminent threat that I was escalating the imminent threat that I was actually monitoring and having to handle in Washington, D.C. And I'm part of it. That's why I was in Texas. Was handling part of the foreign actors and their agents that were doing that threat. So when I heard that particular problem with USA Bank, I found out that they were headquartered in San Antonio. As long as the threat in DC did not become imminent, I had the ability to go to USAA's headquarters and walk through all this stuff, because USAA, they know about the UCC, they know about the filings. And then she says that everybody, including the federal Clinton, knows about the filings. Check this out. And so the MSO, that's how I became aware of the MSO and all the car titles and whatnot. And that when they're mortgaged out, the banks just send the titles over to IMF. I don't think I need to say this, but yes, no. Car titles are not sent to the International Monetary Fund. Then it just keeps getting crazier. You have payments for salaries. I was a prosecutor as well. My check would come from the county auditor, but when you track it all down, it all comes from the IMF. So she's saying that her prosecutors get paid by the International Monetary Fund. That's not true. We have heard testimony, blah blah. Then she starts talking about 1099 OID and a whole mess. Then she talks about your money is not really money. There are debt instruments. Money in America by the Constitution is gold and silver. That's not true. Then she said China is going to be the biggest loser of the cleanup, and then she starts talking about Andrew Jackson. Oh my goodness. She claims that the declaration of fact shut down the system. Then she starts talking about pitchforks. My whole purpose was to protect Randall Bean. Because only America was at risk with that information, that process that was in the video. So here she says that she was trying to protect Randy from the information that was in the Harvey Dent video, even though. If you go back, she was promoting the video, but now she's saying that the video was put America at risk. Then she gets really crazy here. We moved everything from biometric securities to energetic securities during the cleanup in 2012. And in fact, you had Bank of America. Many of the banks are going in and doing patents on, for example, like an iPad where you can put your handprint on it and push out the confirmation for that amount just through your magnetic field. Fingerprint sensors do not measure your magnetic field, but she keeps it. She says American Express and Citibank, they all have these different technologies that they're trying to bring out in order to use the magnetic fields, the energetic fields of the individuals, because there is a lot of information that has been coming out in bits and pieces. Oh my god. It's just by the energetic signature. So, of course, none of that is true. Alright, so we even have a problem which involved DARPA scientists. That came up in Morocco, that the DARPA scientists don't exist, as the OPVT people find out. So between the financial, the legal, and then the technology, you have real security issues that led to this greater threat that was escalating to imminent, which is where I was headed from Houston after dealing with the foreign agents that were doing this threat against the president. So when I got a call from Randy on the 1st, not on the 1st, okay, it was on the 3rd. On the 3rd, I had got a call from him saying he was coming home. That was it, but I didn't have communication. Check this out. I said, do you want to continue in old energies, or do you want to create something new? So on July 4th, I did receive a notice of him of this video, okay? And all this video was some guy, and it said Harvey Dent at the bottom. Other than the contents of the videos, I don't have any information about who made it, because Harvey Dent is not. I could tell somebody in the financial level, or someone high up in the financial systems with the highest level would know those processes. So somebody put together this video that was, after watching that video, I became concerned with the fact that it's out in the public already. There was nothing that could be done about it, and people were clicking on it. You could tell that people were clicking. So I made a call to my contacts in the intelligence, and the same contacts I was working with regarding the threat, which is why I left my home. It appeared that one of foreign actors, I do know Harvey Dent's real identity, that's irrelevant, typically, so with this video in the process, now I'm not familiar with the ACAs, I'm more focused about, as far as the details and technicalities of the ACH, I don't know. All I know is that when someone is able to go in and do 3 million using the Social Security, rounding out with all the rounding out, it's out on the other side. Excuse me. What was concerning is I was familiar with, not a part but familiar with incidents that had happened before. Everything was digitized regarding the Social Security numbers and the Treasury direct deposit accounts. Okay, and essentially what you had going on with the ACH system was the same thing that had happened, you know, 2 decades before, just in paper form. So apparently, apparently Heather here is confirming that she knew that there were paper versions of the TDA scam. I've shown some of those cases in the past. At least in paper form, they were able to manually catch it and not let it go through. A few got through, actually, more than a few got through, which was why they had to train, blah, blah, blah. And then FBI, typically in every instance of fraud, it was the FBI that was utilized. How it was, yeah, oh my goodness. So at this point, I didn't know who had put this video out, who had authorized. All I knew that was that the information that was in there would not be information that anyone who isn't in banking, that they could know it. So at this particular point, with Randy, and basically, I woke up, I was supposed to do a real quiet, I received the message immediately. Give me a minute. Then she says that the dates on Google can be changed. As far as the actual systems, I have worked with Sue Harper Todd. Her husband, ex-husband, is Henry Todd. They were on Mount Everest. I don't even know why she's talking about that. If you want to guess why she's name dropping, go ahead. So my question for with Randy, and then to see the 30 million in CDs supposed to hold that. That isn't even that isn't even a sentence. So my question for with Randy, then to see the 30 million in CDs plus the whole debt thing that was paid off. So I just sat and watched. What does that mean? When I first got notice on July 4th, I sat and watched what everyone on the Universal teams know. So as far as July 4th, I put out a Facebook post with the video and all on. And all on was our code for anything having to do with the Universal cleanup. But it's specifically with the terminating the threat that was escalating to imminent against the President of the United States. So I don't believe Heather actually believes this. Heather says that she wrote all on, and that all on is a code for people for the cleanup, and that all on meant that there was a threat against the President of the United States. Well, obviously nonsense. I posted the video so that everyone could see that, and at that point with 30 million, I already knew Randall was going to be a target, but possibly a whole bunch of others. It's human father. I worked on Haiti. I was so, oh my God. She worked with the tsunami. You could call it a culling. So mainly, anytime is scheme is there for money. I already knew what the FBI was. In this particular instance, that was my concern because there was $30 million in CDs. I went in and tested the HATJ system, so I did. So the HATJ system, I did test, and then threats in DC became imminent, so I had to go there. My last one, but I did that one. I opened a credit card in order to be able to see how that credit card, because they're the only thing that hadn't tested what was a credit card does. By the way, I believe that the credit card she took out is how she paid to go to DC because she was broke at the time. Alright, so check that out. So in this particular instance, I see this video go out. I already know how many people are just going to jump on it. So again, she check that out. I started to check who put the video out. I wanted to know about it because this is something for me. I would never put people in danger. So, oh my God. So my question was, who was pushing this out? Who was pushing this video? And I know it seems like, oh, it's just some accounts, ACH, but it's actually moved there. Oh my God. I'm telling you, this is a moment where, and that's what's been communicated through the different governments and the banking families who have been in contact this entire time throughout this case. I've even spoke about reports I have received from Parker Still and the Department of Justice on certain flaws, how I would handle it, and everything else as far as like the FBI reports that I had received. So he's apparently claiming to be working with the FBI. So this has been a collective effort for this particular case. I already knew what the end result would be, but I had to make a decision. I was concerned about was the immediate risk to the people, because at that point on July 4th, especially when Randall went public, now, okay, this is subjective, I'll admit that, but it appears to me that Heather is now claiming that she was trying to protect people from acting on the information in the video. At least that's what it comes out off as. By the way, even though she put out the video and promoted it saying all on, and of course all the promotion she did on IUV and all the interviews telling people to access the TDA accounts. So her switching to claiming that she was trying to prevent people from accessing the accounts is insanity. People were watching. Yeah, okay, this is what I'm talking. People were watching videos and then making new videos, which was a concern because each person has their network. Blah blah blah. Twitter was a concern. YouTube was a concern, and no attention was being given to it. At least in my contact, trying to determine where this came from. So now she's concerned. She was upset that the video went viral, even though she was promoting it. We've been preparing for some kind of case for me personally over the last 20 years. I never once corrected Randall as far as him saying I was his attorney because nobody can. Everything that I do is paper trailed, and I have relationships with all different agencies, branches, and departments, not just here in the United States, so it's not that it would be a problem at all. The question was, how far do we take this to ferret out the foreign agents okay? Similar to what happened to me during the investigations with the mortgage, there was an unexpected event. I was arrested. At the same time, because of the potential human fodder that would occur from this particular video and the possibility that of humans becoming so discontent that we're looking for solutions everywhere. So, I mean, she's saying that she was concerned that a lot of people would be harmed by the Harvey Dent's video, and she was trying to prevent that. By July 8th, there was no doubt in my mind that Randall would be definitely arrested, but even though she never told Randall that he would be arrested. And by the way, this contradicts what Randy said about that. They didn't know that he would get in trouble. He did. One thing, when he stated attorney, most people don't know the difference between lawyer and attorney, or the vocational. All I know is what I've received from a member of TJOJ. That's this fake DOJ lady. I didn't correct him. I even said it on a video. This is the only human part of her testimony. She says that she hates video. I think later on she says that she doesn't like seeing herself on video, or something like that. Like she doesn't like being recorded. Basically, that she hates looking at herself. It's actually pretty sad. It's a pretty sad moment. Anyways, check this out. So there was a radio show, and I explained to everyone, if you are doing it, you know, at this point, don't do anything that you don't feel comfortable or that you don't know about. If you are doing it, keep screenshots of everything so that everything can be handed over to the authorities, because at that point I had not tested. I tested it twice. Once was a CD application and it didn't work, so I'm not sure how I was not sure how Randall was able to do 30 of them. Now during this trial I see how it was done, because of the fact it was cashed out within 2 hours. They didn't do the hold. So Heather has a moment of complete lucidity and realizes that Randy was able to get money out because the USAA screwed up and didn't put a hold on the CD. He did not access his TDA account. Here Heather says it in black and white. As USAA, the witness stated that they were supposed to have a 10-day hold on it. And then they didn't do the communication. They do this 10-day hold. Obviously, there's no way that they will hold. So that became even more of a concern for us, because if it's one institution, maybe it's possible in others. So now she says that she was concerned about bugs in the system. Okay, at this point, they take a break for the day. Keep in mind, Heather's been talking, I don't know, a couple of hours. So this is like by 5. So Heather's been talking for about 5 hours uninterrupted. Anyways, this is what I was mentioning from day one. Remember that in day one, Heather is complaining that the RV and the money had not been seized. Okay, so this is what we're talking about. This is the judge. Before we do that, the court notes that the indictment in this case contains forfeiture allegations, and they concern the motorhome as well as personal money judgment. Blah blah blah. Keep that in mind. This is a judge speaking with federal rule. Blah blah blah. if the indictment states that the government seek a forfeiture, the court must decide before the jury begins whether, in other words, because only if it's your. Okay, but here they explain how the money and the RV is dealt with. If either party requests, and if there were a guilty verdict after Mr. Bean, then at the request of either party, the jury would then have to deliberate as to whether forfeiture is ruined. So the RV and the money don't get taken back until there is a guilty verdict. So just either party seek a determination about the law, so they deal with the forfeiture of the motorhome. So keep in mind, Heather, super expert in the law, who works with every single government agency in the world, did not know that this is how forfeiture works in federal criminal cases. To be fair, I didn't know this either, but again, I'm not ultra mega expert. Anyways, Bean says that he asked for the jury determination, blah blah, and Brandy's lawyer here enters a good faith defense. He's basically trying to argue that he thought the money was his. The lawyer tries to put it into the jury instructions, and that's where it ends. So day 6 is actually kind of boring, but we'll do it anyways.